Hi, I'm Marc Loftus. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Post TV. And today I'm speaking with Jon Bach of Puget Systems, a Washington state-based builder of custom computers for digital content creation. Jon, thanks for taking some time to speak with us.
Awesome. Glad to be here.
Good to have you. I have a little bit of a background having checked out your website, but for those of us who may not be familiar with the company, can you give us a little bit of a background and who your audience is or who your customers are?
Yeah, sure. So Puget Systems, we've been in business 20 years now, and we design and manufacture workstations for like very specific purposes. So our customers would be content creators or like in post-production, visual effects, rendering, engineering, scientists. Anytime that we have a very like specific and high like compute need project, we bring our expertise in knowing about hardware and software and the workflow in order to design like very purposeful, fast workstations for each person.
So the content creation workstations that you guys design, editorial, graphics design, color correction, what are some of the segments that people may be using it for?
Yeah. I mean, definitely like post-production visual effects.
Hmm.
We do see some audio workstations. Color grading is definitely a big one. We tend to approach it more on like the software package of the workflow. So we see a lot of Adobe Suite,
Hmm.
Premiere, After Effects, DaVinci Resolve. It's been awesome to see how much steam that's picked up in
It's
recent years.
amazing what they just keep adding features to it, color grading, editing, sound. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's all changing so quickly as more adopts like GPU acceleration, or as, now we have, what is it, like 36 core processors, a ridiculous number of cores on processors. The answer is always changing. When you ask the question, what is the best hardware for my work?
Hmm.
Even when we give you an answer today, 6 months from now, it so much has changed. And
Yeah.
so, it gives us really endless work to do to be able to stay on top of those things and provide like timely recommendations.
You mentioned GPU acceleration. Are you doing a lot of NVIDIA equipped or AMD equipped workstations for people who need that type of power? Yeah.
Yeah, both. And we work with both those companies. We work directly with Intel, with AMD, with NVIDIA, with a number of other ODMs to not only, make sure that we have all of the most current knowledge and experience with the platforms that they're putting out, but also to feed feedback back into them that we gather from all of the end users that we support in order to help steer them towards even better features down the road.
Mhm. Tell us what the process would be if somebody were to call you looking for, your services. They would say, "Hey, this is the type of work I'm doing." They would mention the software that they'd probably be working around, and
Mhm.
then you would configure something based on those type of needs.
Yeah, and there's a couple of more in the weeds type of things that we need to know. If there's any like budget constraints or budget targets, that gives us our guardrails to work within. And then we have to roll up our sleeves and really get into the details of what you're doing. What exactly is your workflow? A lot of times, it isn't so simple as to say, well, I'm doing post-production in Premiere, because you might also be doing visual effects 20% of the time. And so we have to build
Hmm.
kind of a mixed workflow type workstation. But yeah, we need to know, what codecs are you using? Are you using proxied workflows, or are you not? What are your biggest pain points you have today? Asking those types of questions really helps us get into, what you particularly value, what would make for a better experience for you.
Hmm.
Our goal is to get you a workstation that you can even forget is there. Because
Yeah.
when somebody is in their element and they're in their creative process, that's the last time you want to see the little like buffering circle. You want to be able to, you want your workstation to keep up with your process.
Do you have a core workstation that you work with and then build upon, or is everything unique when somebody comes to you?
Well, I mean, the end product is unique, and we pride ourselves in not pumping out like cookie cutter configurations. That's
Hmm.
why we can provide values, because we can tailor it to each person. But you're right, the foundations, like the core of the system, is often the same kind of platform that we build on top of. And so we forge relationships with like chassis manufacturers and motherboard manufacturers and power supply manufacturers to put together that like core offering. And then at that like 11th hour, when we're having that conversation with you, that's when we decide exactly how much memory to put in, what disks, what processor, that finishing out of the configuration. That's the part where we're super flexible. And then we kind of build that core experience on that foundation.
PC and Mac, PC specific? Do you guys? Do both or what?
We do PC.
You do?
We have to be very. In fact, we have a number of Macs right here in the building. We have to. A lot of Apple users have been moving over to the PC side, and so even though that's not a product we can resell and tailor the same way
Hmm.
that we can do on the PC side, we still have to understand it, and we still have to be able to answer the questions. Would I be in a better spot if I were to move to PC? We have to have an educated answer for that.
Mhm. Have you had any inquiries for remote desktop or remote workflows these days? Obviously, the considerations of what's going on with the pandemic, it had been heading that way to begin with, but even more
Mhm.
so now. Are you finding any of that?
Yes. The challenge always, and especially with like content creation, is that the size of the data. Oftentimes, you need to have your compute where your data is, because it's not trivial to put all of that into two different areas. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, Frame.io, I'm speaking with later this afternoon.
Hmm.
Great, example of ways that the cloud can, not necessarily like take over the need for local workstation, but to help facilitate coordination when people aren't in the same room like they were a few months ago.
Right. Yeah. Remote collaboration and getting all these people in different locations able to communicate and share content.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
And the move to cloud, that's always going to be a topic of discussion. We have not seen, a big shift in that direction, but in the same way that we have Macs in the building, we have people working on the cloud as well, because in order to really understand the user's work, we have to understand that piece of it too.
I was going to ask you a little bit about trends going forward. The cloud, maybe we'll see more of. You were thinking maybe the processors also, AMD or Intel. Is that a trend you
Yeah.
see leaning one way or another?
Well, it's an exciting time to be in the industry. It's a chaotic time to be in the industry, because for so long, Intel just had such a dominant foothold on everything compute,
Hmm.
and AMD came in just a little over a year and came in with some really competitive offerings, really compelling offerings. And in that kind of situation, everyone wins, because now
Hmm.
there's good competition, and we're seeing more innovation and more like pushing the performance envelope in the last year than we've seen in a long time. Now, with that innovation comes a fair bit of chaos as well,
Hmm.
because all the companies, AMD and Intel, are well, I don't want to say like tripping over each other, but they're pushing themselves much harder than they had in the past, and that oftentimes leads to a less developed and polished end product. So a company like us needs to come in and make sure that it isn't always about selling only the fastest product. It has to be the product that will do the job. It'll be stable, um, and it has to be able to get the work done reliably, just as much as it does quickly.
Gotcha. If anybody wanted to learn more of Puget Systems, can you direct them to your website?
Yeah, it's PugetSystems.com, Puget, for those of you that don't know the Puget Sound area. And we really thrive on one-on-one conversations. So almost any place on our website, if you drill down deep enough, it's just a contact form where we'd like to actually get on a phone call with you, get on a Zoom call with you, because these types of tailoring a very specific hardware to your workflow, we have to have those conversations to do that job.
Yeah, absolutely. Understood. Great. Well, I want to thank you, John, for taking some time to speak with us, sharing some news with our audience that may not have been familiar with the company, and directing them to the site to find out more information.
Of course, my pleasure.